All right, guys, in this lesson, we're going to be focusing on cool and warm colors. So we're going to set up a chart to help us distinguish our cool colors from our warm colors. We're going to be referring to our color wheel that we did earlier in the year. And I'm going to go over now some of the materials we're going to need. You are going to need crayons, watercolor paints, a brush, a cup of water to rinse your brush in, a dime, a quarter, a pencil, and an eraser. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you are going to trace your quarter down the cool side. So on the left hand side, you are going to trace 6 quarters. Okay, so I just put this in place and traced around it with my pencil. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. So you're going to come down the right hand side over here, and you are going to trace 6 quarters down this side. Once you have that done, you will do the same thing. You will trace 10 dimes down the cool side and 10 dimes down the warm side. If you don't have a quarter or a dime, anything that's a round circle will do. Okay? All right. Let's talk about the colors of crayons I'm going to start with. So before I show you, let's go back to our color wheel that we completed earlier in the year. So we've already completed our color wheel, and we've practiced making all of our secondary and tertiary colors. So we should be really ready for this project. And now we're looking at warm and cool colors. For this project, we are essentially going to be drawing the line right across here. These will be our cool colors for this assignment, and these will be our warm colors, okay? So we're gonna start with our cool colors first, and we're gonna go back to our chart. So what I did is I went through my crayons, and I found the colors that are the cool colors that are on the color wheel. So the first one I'm gonna start with is violet. You can see that right there on the crayon. What I'm going to do on my small circle is I'm going to trace firmly around the circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to color it in. Okay, so once you finish with your violet or purple crayon, we're going to move on to the tertiary color, blue violet. Now, if you can't find these exact colors in your crayons, you can either leave them blank or find a color that you think is as close as possible to blue violet. Okay, so we're just going to do the same exact thing. Press very firmly to get a nice bold color. For the project that's coming up, it's going to be important that you are pressing firmly on your crayons. Don't press so hard that you break them, but you should get a really waxy layer on here. Okay, so we'll move on to our next color. Our next one will be blue. After blue, we'll do blue-green. We're going to use green. Oops, try not to break your crayons, which I just did. And then our last one will be yellow-green. So I'm gonna blow any of those little bits off. The reason I don't rub my hand against it or brush them off with my hand is because if I do, I'll get little marks of crayon all over my paper. Okay, so there we have our cool colors that we'll be using for this project. And now we're gonna come over to our warm colors. We're gonna start with yellow, and we'll do the same process down the warm side. Our next color will be yellow-orange. Then orange. Next we'll do red orange. Red. And finally, red violet. Okay, so we've laid out our cool and warm colors with our crayons. And for our purposes, we are going to use red violet as a warm color and yellow green as a cool color. We could get into debate about whether this is actually a warm color and this is a cool color, but for this assignment, this is the way we're going to organize our colors. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is we will paint our cool and warm colors so that they are following the same pattern. Okay, so we'll be back in just a couple minutes to do that. Okay, so we're back for the second step in this process, and for this one we're going to need our watercolors. Now hopefully you've already activated your watercolor paints, but if you haven't or you've forgotten what that means we are going to get a cup of clean water. We're going to use a brush and we are going to put one dot of paint into each of the colors that we will be using. Okay, I would continue to go through and do that. So the reason we activate our paints is it prepares them for use, and it works a lot better than just going in with a slightly damp brush and trying to use your watercolors. Okay, so let's start. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start on this side and move this way so that my hand isn't brushing back and forth. If you're left-handed, you are going to start in the opposite manner. You'll start on this side and work your way over. Either way, you can watch and follow along to how we do this, even if you need to stop and do it in a different order. Okay, so we are going to start with our secondary and primary colors first. They are in our palette already for us, so we don't actually need to mix them up. So remember, this first one is violet or purple, and your watercolor paints may not actually match 100% the color of the crayon, and that is perfectly fine. Don't worry about that. If you need to label your crayon colors, you can do that if that's going to help you remember and your paints so that you know what color was what. We could do that at the end. Or you can do that before you start painting. It's your choice. Okay. I'll let that dry. I'm going to wash my brush using a figure-8 shape in my water, making sure my brush is clean. If you have a tissue, you can always wipe your brush on it to make sure it's clean if you're not sure. Okay, so we're going to skip this one, which was blue-violet for right now, and we're going to move on to blue. And again, this chart that we're creating, this is going to be a great resource for you on our assignment to help you do well. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush out, and next I'm going to paint in my green. So I'm going to move this up so you can see it better. And we're going to go in and paint our green. And so far, just something interesting to note, the green watercolor paint is the one that seems to most closely match the crayon. Just an interesting observation as I'm painting. If you go outside of your lines, that's okay. This is practice, and we're really more concerned about our colors right now than perfection. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to move my paint palette over so that you can follow along as I mix colors. I know we've practiced this before, but it's always good to review. Okay, so my job here now is to make blue-violet. So remember, to make blue-violet, I'm going to start with my blue, I'm going to find a clean spot on my palette, rinse my brush out, and add some violet or purple. If it's still looking too blue, I'll add a little bit more purple. I think I'm almost there. I might add a little bit more. Try not to have a ton of water on your brush when you go in and pick up your purple or your violet, because that just makes a very watery color, very translucent. So now we're going to paint this in. Make sure you have mixed up enough of the color to fill in your circle. And that should, as you already know, look different from the purple and the blue. If it matches either one, you haven't done a proper job of mixing your tertiary color. And again, we're noticing that the crayon version of the color is not identical to what we're making with watercolor. And that's okay. Different paints will have different names, and so you could buy 3 different brands of blue paint, and each would be a little bit different. All right, now we're going to make blue-green. We're going to start with our green paint. You're going to put it on a clean spot on our palette. I'm going to rinse my brush out, and what I do is I gently press the bristles of my brush along the side of my water container to get out some of the extra paint that's in there. I'm going to add a little bit of blue at a time. I'm painting my blue-green. Okay, rinse my brush. And now it's time to make my yellow-green. So I'm going to start with the yellow, making sure my brush is very clean. I'm going to put that in my palette. Rinse my brush again. I'm going to do a very small amount of green. And again, remember we could debate whether this should be in the cool column, but for now, for this assignment, we're going to stick with this being in the cool colors, okay? So we generally think of blue, purple, and green as being our cool colors. Okay, so our cool side is done, and again, it's interesting how the greens are matching up much more closely than the blues do, and the violets. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the warm side. And again, we're going to start with our primaries and secondaries first, because we have them in our palettes already. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush. I am going to skip yellow-orange for now, and I'm going to go straight to the orange. I'm going to add a little bit more water to my brush for this one. The more water you have on your brush, the lighter or more transparent the color will be. If your color feels too light or too transparent, you still need a wet brush, but you can pull some of the water out just by pressing the bristles gently against the side of your water cup. Okay, I'm going to rinse that. And I'm going to move on to my red. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush, and I am going to take a paper towel, and I'm going to scoot this over, and I'm going to carefully wipe out my paint palette so that when I go to mix my warm colors, I have enough space to do so, and they don't mix with my cool colors that were already in there. So it's not a super wet, it's a damp paper towel, just slightly damp, and I just wipe that off. Okay. I think that'll give me enough space to mix my colors. So now we are going to mix our yellow-orange. We're going to start with our yellow. Make sure your brush is clean. And we're going to add a small amount of orange. And I can always add more. So it's just a tiny amount. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush out. Now I'm going to be making red orange. I'm going to start with my my orange first actually. Rinse my brush. So we're always rinsing our brush between colors. And I am going to add some red. And again, I'm going to start with just a little bit. And paint that in. Noticing also that I'm not using a great big brush for this. So pick a medium to small size brush. Always pick the appropriate brush for the job. So if it's not a great big area, you probably shouldn't be using a great big brush. Okay. I'm going to rinse that out, and I'm going to mix up my red violet. For this, I'm going to start with my red first, because the violet is much darker. I'm going to add a touch of water there. Rinse my brush. And add a tiny amount of violet. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more. I'm rinsing my brush between colors. So I'm adding this pretty slowly. And so what's pretty interesting to me is that as I was working, I noticed that the warm colors, when it came to the watercolors, the warm side matched the crayon colors much more closely than they did on the cool side. It's just a little observation I noticed as I was painting. Okay, so if I were you, I would suggest going back in and using a pencil to mark the different colors that we just put in. So let's see if I can find my pencil laying around here. And we had, I'm going to be very careful, and I'm actually just going to abbreviate the colors. So we'll start at the bottom. We have red, violet, yellow, green. We have red, green. Try not to rest your hand on there. That's why I said you might want to wait until these dry. Blue, green. Red, orange. If you are doing this without waiting for it to dry, you need to be very careful. Orange. Yellow, orange. Yellow. Over here, I'm going to write a V for violet. When I'm talking about colors on the color wheel, I almost always refer to it as violet. That's the way I was taught, and so that's how I refer to it. Then we have blue violet. And we have blue. There we go. Okay. So now we have our chart showing our colors going from warm over here and cool over here, which we will be using on our upcoming project. And this chart will help us to remember what our warm colors are and what our cool colors are as we work. I hope this was helpful to you.